Palworld version 1.0 is coming out sometime this year, and I thought what better way to commemorate this wonderful moment than to test out everything Palworld has to offer right now in version 0.7.3. Palworld currently has 115 different pals, 71 alpha bosses roaming the overworld, 14 tower bosses, and 11 raid bosses waiting to ruin your day. And while plenty of people have taken on the challenge of capturing all 115 pals in the game, I would imagine that experience was about as enjoyable as the back massage Bane gave Batman in The Dark Knight Rises. So naturally, I thought, yeah, I should do that too. For this run, the run started extremely well. My very first chest actually gave me 2 Pal Spheres, and since I'm only slightly obsessed with this game, I collected 10 wood, 3 stone and 1 Paldium fragment. I immediately rushed through the early missions, placing down a primitive workbench, unlocking the Pal Box and Pal Sphere, dropping my Paldium fragment on the floor just so I could pick it back up. After crafting a Pal Sphere and a wooden club, I captured my first Pal, a Lambor, completing the mission and rewarding me with 3 extra spheres. I then headed down the hill, collecting resources, when by some miracle, encountered a bunch of frozen chickens sprinting around. Naturally, I had targeted the weakest link, a level 3 Pengallet, and immediately began introducing him to the concept of submission. After unlocking the nearby waypoint, I continued deeper into Papagos Island and accepted the Farmer's Gold quest and somehow managed to aggro an entire flock of herbivores. As I fled for my life, I managed to capture another Lambor and another Pengallet before encountering what could only be described as a walking pocket god. I captured it immediately, giving me my 3rd pal of the game. I then slapped down my Pal Box and started unlocking some early game structures, and quickly realized my Lambor had thoughtfully prepared some roasted Pekin duck for lunch. I then gave a few suggestions for my Lambor before making my way to the small settlement, introducing my Pengallet to its new owner, who is definitely more ethical than I would be, rewarding me with 5 Megaspheres and some gold coins. I also handed over the special dish to the security guard in the tower, and using my newly acquired wealth, I headed to the merchant and purchased some wheat, flame organs, and leather. I also proudly displayed my pocket goblin to the local Pal critic, who gave me 10 Pal Spheres for ruining his day. I returned to my base, unlocked a second base slot, and assigned my life monk to begin collecting wood and fiber while dumping my entire inventory into the storage boxes. I also gave another suggestion to my pals to craft 2 pieces of cloth before heading out to explore. Soon after, I captured a Vixie, bringing me to a pal count of 5, another life monk. I also captured a Sparkit, another Vixie, and unlocked the Desolate Church waypoint, and made my way towards the Bridge of the Twin Knight waypoint, picking up 2 Vixies, 1 Rush Ball, another Fork, and another Dire Howl along the way. I then returned to my base to organize my inventory and quickly realized I was only level 8. So, I teleported to the Behemoth Hill waypoint and claimed my reward from the Farmer Gold and captured 2 additional Kremis and bullied 2 Fox Pucks into becoming my 10th pal for the game and hitting level 10. Back at the base, I used the cloth that I had crafted earlier to build the Pal Gear workbench and commissioned another 2 pieces of cloth and scrambled to craft my Dire House saddle, unlocking my designated Uber driver for the beginning of the run. Once the saddle was completed, I reorganized my party and began making my way towards the ravine waypoint, where I lucked into another Gigasphere before heading towards the sealed realm of the Swordmaster. Next to the waypoint in the shoal, I managed to capture a serpent using the back bonus, giving me another Uber driver specifically for the ocean. Then made my way to the small cove waypoint and picked up a Gumos and Ruby along the way. I then returned to my base, unlocked the serpent saddle and fed my workers with food I had generously confiscated from the local wildlife population by enslaving them, and also placed down a bunch of pal beds, a berry plantation, a campfire, and the Statue of Power. Because unfortunately, my workforce optimization requires developing some form of infrastructure. And with my water taxi ready, I began making my way towards the Isle of Terraria, and since this trip took several business days to complete, this kind of felt like another opportunity for me to plug my other challenge video, which was spending 100 days to defeat Hatelis Ultra, which is honestly kind of a prequel to this video, since I needed to prove that you could actually defeat Hatelis Ultra in 100 days. And since the strategy I am going to be using here is practically identical, it is also the most optimized strategy I have cooked up thus far. That said, this challenge had a not very small setback, which was the fact that I was not only focusing on defeating Hatelis Ultra, but also the other endgame bosses such as Xenolot Ultra and Moonlord Master. If I wanted to defeat all of them within the time frame of 100 days, I needed to adjust my strategy accordingly. The reality is, Hatelis Ultra, Xenolot Ultra, and Moonlord Master was going to be the biggest roadblocks for this challenge. And so, majority of my time for the rest of the run is going to revolve around those battles. That's in the future, and until we get to that point, my current objective was relatively simple. I'm going to be spending majority of my time raiding every loot spawn in Fabric Island in search of ultimate spheres, technique handbooks, and most importantly, dog coins. They say that money might not be the key to happiness. In Power, it is surprisingly close, if happiness meant torturing yourself for 100 days. After collecting the items and arriving at the Emberstone Plateau, I headed back to the Isle of Terraria waypoint and made my way to Fisherman's Point, where I purchased a thermal undershirt, tomato seeds and lettuce seeds using the gold coins I scrounged up from the loot spawns. I then headed towards the Desolate Church to purchase the multi-climate undershirt +1, giving me full immunity to any weather. I then returned to my base and continued forcing my pals into some unpaid industrial labor, building new structures and specifically producing iron ingots. After picking up more loot spawns and arriving at the lowest plains waypoint, and dumped more items into storage while setting my pals more work. At this point, I hope you noticed the pattern right here. My main contribution to my base and infrastructure was essentially telling my pals, "Good job guys, here's more work for you." I needed my pals to handle more responsibilities such as collecting materials and building structures. To prevent my brain from overheating, I just outsourced all of my responsibilities to my pals and continued running around the map with my trusty doggo. Anyway, once I arrived at the Oculus Gate Tower waypoint, I repeated the same process, this time obtaining the basic shield, which will be my endgame shield of choice. After that, I eventually arrived at the Shipwreck waypoint and ordered my pals to smelt more ingots, build a high quality workbench, hot spring, and 2 berry plantations, while I went on a short walk to the nearby hills to liberate the Incineram and Lease punks from the morally great syndicate goons in the area. And by liberate, I mean recruiting them into another lifetime of labor. I also ran around capturing the 5 lamb balls I needed to complete my main quest. I then returned to the Emberstone Plateau, sentencing the Liz Punk to servitude to a completely random stranger, whom rewarded me with 300,000 EXP, giving me level 30 and access to the fishing rod. I then returned to my base and gave several more instructions, such as crafting a meal, flour and parachute, while I prepared my fishing rod. My next course of action was to begin capturing the local seafood from the dirty waters next to the level 65 oil rigs, since the difficult living conditions here probably resulted in stronger pals, specifically with the levels between 55 to 60. And after several tries, I walked away with a level 60 Gangler Ignis at the beginning of day 3. I then continued my looting addiction for the rest of day 3, collecting loot spawns throughout the frozen region of Fabric Island. Once again, I returned to my base and gave my base pals a never-ending list of responsibilities before heading to the foot of the volcano waypoint. I then spent the rest of day 3 sucking up loot from the Oasis Owl and Isle of the Decayed Treasures, waiting for the night cycle, where I made my way to the heart of Fabric Island to challenge my first alpha boss, the Beast of Salvation, Celestia. I spent the rest of the night and the first 10 minutes of day 4 fighting the beast and eventually captured it. I then returned to my base and pretended to contribute while my pals continued to develop our civilization before heading out to the first major objective. I had just acquired an extremely strong pal, so it was time for me to chase one of the big boy legendaries, Frostallion. And just a quick tip for everyone, most overworld alpha fights becomes drastically easier just by placing down a pal box, since it acts as a respawn point and also allows you to rotate your pals in and out of the pal box, resetting their cooldowns. Now, I could definitely have fought Frostallion normally, but I am also lazy and I just decided I'm not really trying to play fair. So I decided to use the highly advanced and complicated, mechanically heavy strategy. I simply just stood there, dying over and over and swapping Celestia in and out of the pal box to have it cast its overpowered ability, Holy Burst, shaving away Frostallion's health by several hundred at a time. Since, at this point, death for me was just a mild inconvenience. And now, at the end of day 4, Frostallion was now my legendary Steed of Ice. But I didn't just stop there. I then fast travelled to the foot of the volcano waypoint and headed into the Obsidian Cave to hire my new employee of the month, Blazamute. Using the same strategy, this battle was really easy and I had captured one of the best pals in the game with level 4 mining and level 3 kindling. On day 5, I returned to the desolate church and placed a pal box right next to the ore deposits, establishing my temporary industrial facility and placed my level 4 workers to begin harvesting resources while I transferred my supplies from my original base. I then began building the essentials such as hot springs for sanity recovery and plantations for food, before returning to the shipwreck waypoint and making my way to the deserted Ash Plateau. At this point, I had burned through most of my ultimate spheres, so it was time for me to play Loot Goblin Simulator once more. Eventually, during the night cycle, Splatterinas began to spawn in the area, which conveniently were nocturnal and had the level 4 handiwork work skill, so I decided to give them a job offer that they couldn't refuse, since their opinion was not considered. And by the end of day 6, I had collected enough dog coins to change my life for the better, obtaining the V1 armor schematic. Before obtaining this armor, I was as durable as a piece of wet tissue paper. But with this armor, I began cosplaying as Iron Man against the wild pals in the game, minus the endless riches. By midday of day 7, I had sucked up as much loot as I could from Fabric Island and began using the heaps of materials obtained by my pals to begin advancing my base. I placed down a production assembly line, electric generator, as well as headed towards Fisherman's Point to begin purchasing an obscene number of high quality power oil so that I could begin crafting my legendary V1 armor. However, I still lacked the ingots necessary, so I decided to begin hunting green fishing spawns for remarkable craftsmanship. Although I was successful in obtaining several rainbow traits, I did not manage to obtain any useful ones and instead got things like Mastery of Fasting or Vampiric. So I then decided to begin farming the rampaging pals in Fabric using my patented strategy of Return by Death. Defeating the Incineram Noct and Hellzephyr Lux, giving me level 44. On day 8, I encountered 3 more fishing spawns and the jackpot with a Gelroy carrying only 1 rainbow trait, Remarkable Craftsmanship. I returned to my base and headed towards the ancient ritual site, hunting for a female Cinemoth, preferably with no traits, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking at the female for their personalities. Eventually, I managed to find one which could create the perfect pal for my industrial complex that I called a base, a Yakumo with remarkable craftsmanship. I headed south of my base to complete the mission Hungry for Recruit, where I presented my pocket goblin with bottomless stomach, earning me 3 kicks. This allowed me to get 3 chances of breeding a perfect Yakumo using the Cinemoth and the Gelroy. In the meantime, I began building an egg incubator and had begun crafting my Iron Man suit for the run. Since I just had to wait for my objectives to be completed by my reliable workers, I decided to continue committing endless violence instead and began defeating the rampaging pals, giving me level 47. Next, I returned to my base and placed the fruits of my labors, I mean my hardworking pals, into the egg incubators and headed towards Fisherman's Point to begin collecting the nearby coal deposits, as my next objective was to craft the Frostallion saddle, pushing my veteran Direhowl to unemployment. I also headed towards the sealed realm of the Frozen Wings to begin capturing the Pangolids repeatedly to harvest their ice organs, because somehow I needed to use some organs to craft the saddle on a flying ice Pegasus. Never mind, there's no real logic here. Moving on. On day 9, I obtained a Yakumo with remarkable craftsmanship on my first try, which meant that my run was about to truly begin. But before that, I returned to my PAL box near Fisherman's Point and continued collecting the coal deposits and headed back to Fabric Island to begin bullying the rampaging pals, pushing myself to level 48. I then continued to gather green fishing spawns and obtained a Kelp Sea with diamond body, several other useless pals with rainbow traits, but finally I managed to obtain a Fuak with Demon God. On day 10, I decided to take a break from fishing and began heading north of the Isle of the Decayed Treasures, unlocking the Arena Waypoint and the Oasis Isle Waypoint before heading to the sealed realm of the Swift Waypoint, while waiting for my V1 armor to finish crafting. I then realized that I had made a slight miscalculation earlier in the run, as I had ran out of Paldium fragments, which felt really bad since, I was supposed to be optimizing a challenge run. So I began to manually gather Paldium fragments and fortunately stumbled upon another green trait, giving me the final rainbow trait I needed. And using my freshly obtained Paldium fragments, I crafted the Yakumo saddle and unlocked Yakumo's partner ability, passing its trait onto any wild pals I obtained. This essentially meant that I had developed the HR department for my base to help me recruit suitable candidates for my industrial complex. And as a proof of concept, the very first pal that I had managed to capture was a B-Guard with remarkable craftsmanship. And although this got me excited and wanted to begin recruiting as many base pals as possible, I decided to curb my enthusiasm and made my way to the Free Pal Alliance Tower instead, to battle Lily and her Lylene. Using a similar trick to the Pal box strategy, I began swapping out my Pal's attacks in the middle of the run, which also resetted their attack cooldowns, allowing me to quickly defeat the boss and unlock the ore mining site. I then headed towards the desert region to begin hunting ray hounds with the remarkable craftsmanship trait, but my HR department decided that majority of them was not a good fit for my base. But eventually, I managed to obtain a suitable ray hound on my 14th capture. On day 11, I had just finished recruiting a suitable ray hound before realizing how expensive it was to ride a legendary flying ice horse. So I began to farm its materials through the best method I knew how, by liberating more pals from captivity inside their dungeon. And don't worry, I was not kidnapping these poor frozen chickens. Eventually, my dire howl was officially retired from service, and I headed towards the Mosenda forest to capture a Mosenda. I then travelled towards Sakurajima, unlocking the different waypoints before arriving at my destination, the Wildlife Sanctuary number 2. This was where my Yakumo strategy is about to pay dividend, as my mission was to obtain a Yomentai Ignis with remarkable craftsmanship and level 4 kindling. It was simple. Surely nothing could go wrong, right? And if you look closely, which I obviously did not, I was using the wrong Yakumo in my party for the recruitment, instead using one that also possessed the trait Serenity. Surely this wouldn't backfire on me, right? Eventually, on my 11th capture, getting frustrated at my bad RNG, I had an inkling that I was using the wrong Yakumo and realized that I was indeed using the wrong employee from my HR department, so I quickly swapped it out, but as if the game was mocking me.
Oh, fuck yeah, this is the shit! Kill me now!
Finally, after wasting 35 Ultra Spheres and losing the 50% roll between Serenity and Remarkable Craftsmanship 3 times, I have finally obtained my ideal worker of a Yomentai Ignis with Remarkable Craftsmanship. I then headed south of the sanctuary towards the Phantom Isle, the home of Ganglers, as the Ganglers had naturally possessed level 4 watering. But this time, with the correct employee, my strategy worked extremely quickly, giving me the perfect candidate on my 4th capture. And not to mention the cherry on top, there was a Kindling Elemental chest which gave me a Kindling Technique Handbook, allowing me to raise my Yomentai Ignis Kindling level to level 5. I then headed to the Sunlit Isle, where I began hunting the local dinosaur population, since Bralohas naturally came with level 4 gathering and planting. Somehow, on my 2nd capture, I managed to roll a Demon God, but it was still totally useless. It was still cool though. Eventually, on my 10th applicant, I obtained my 3rd essential base spell. And with the technique handbooks that I had on hand, I had a level 5 Kindling Pal with Remarkable Craftsmanship, a Pal with level 5 Planting and level 4 Gathering, a Pal with level 4 Watering. My next objective was to obtain my Mining Department, Handiwork Personnel, and Electrical Department. I first headed towards the desert, hoping the Anubis would see the merits of being a remarkable craftsman. I unfortunately failed. I then headed towards the sealed realm of the Thunder Dragon to capture a Relaxaurus, but unfortunately got one with the remarkable craftsmanship trait, but with the wrong gender. But since electricity was not a priority at the moment, I decided to move on. I then headed towards the volcanic region to capture Jet Dragon, quickly made my way to the Power Genetic Research Tower to challenge Victor and his Shadow Beak. And using the same strategy I did against Lily and her Lylene, I quickly defeated Victor using Jet Dragon and unlocked the Astral Frost Cavern, which was huge for my future POW breeding purposes. I then returned to Fabric Island during the night cycle and began my job recruitment for Splatterinas, but unfortunately did not find any suitable candidates. On day 13, I began moving my items to my main base of choice, the Sunlit Owl, and began running the Astral Frost Cavern expeditions, providing me with one civilization call every 30 minutes. Meanwhile, I began breeding Rayhound and Mosenda together in hopes of obtaining a Grisbolt with remarkable craftsmanship. Yeah, this was one of my main strategies, especially in the previous runs, and had wasted a bunch of time in this run doing this, but I'm gonna be omitting the details of this strategy since I also abandoned this strategy later on in this run. Yeah, so it's just not gonna be there. Next, I began farming the Terraria dungeon whenever I could in order to obtain the legendary Terra Prisma schematic. And if you did not understand the power of this weapon absolutely trivializes the challenges in this game and essentially turns difficult endgame battles into running around until your problems were solved. Next, I captured a Omascule from Fabric Island and began breeding it with my Kelpsie to produce a Yakumo with the Swift trait. I then revisited Blazamute and using the correct Yakumo, managed to obtain one with remarkable craftsmanship. Since I still needed significantly more employees in my mining department, I would continue on to capture Astagon, Blazamute, and even the Noctlum Alpha bosses daily, but once again, spoiler alert from Kion in the future, I do not obtain any more pals with remarkable craftsmanship using this period. Yeah. Additionally, it has been about 10 days since I began collecting loot spawns in Fabric Island, which meant that the loot spawns were beginning to respawn once more. So currently, my daily routine turned into capturing my mining pals, into farming Terraria dungeon, into farming rampaging pals on Fabric Island, then farming the loot spawns in Fabric Island. On day 14, I also defeated the Terrantris Alpha boss, since conveniently I obtained a supply drop right next to it, and it was also extremely convenient in the sense that it was the objective for a nearby mission. And by defeating it, I was rewarded with 300,000 EXP and another 5 Ultimate Spheres. On day 5, I managed to obtain a Yakumo with the Swift trait, but it also contained a second trait which wasn't really perfect, but it was good enough and it gave me another daily task to complete, capturing Frostallion, since the legendary Steed of Ice was going to be my main mount of choice for the Xenolod Ultra Raid boss. And on the night cycle, I have finally managed to find a suitable Splatterina on my 9th attempt. On day 16, since I finally had my handiwork pal, I headed towards the legend-loving researcher and presented my ice horse, earning me the handiwork technique handbook, giving me my ideal base spell, a Splatterina with handiwork level 5. This was a good day for me as fortune was on my side, since I not only managed to obtain my first Swiftie, somehow I also managed to encounter a wandering merchant who was apparently visiting the middle of the snowy mountains, but I'm not gonna complain as he gave me access to Paldium fragments without needing to be a slave for my corporate empire manually gathering Paldium fragments. Okay, so for days 17 to 19, I kinda forgot to record these 3 days, and I honestly could not remember what happened, but from what I could gather from watching the VODs, since one of my Pangolin had a Vanguard trait, I began capturing the Elfridran Alpha boss to eventually breed a Yakumo with Demon God. I had also captured a Nightmare and crafted the Vortex Beater from the Terraria dungeon, which was huge as it allowed me to begin doubling the souls dropped from the rampaging pals. And I also began incorporating the Sakurajima rampaging pals as well as the Soothsayer rampaging pal to my routine. At this point, I also gave up on trying to capture the mining pal and had instead began breeding the Blazamutes together for my mining department. Or in corporate terms, my company was looking for employees to be part of the family, except it was literally family. Then on days 20, for reasons that I couldn't explain, my Diahao came out of retirement and I was capturing Univotes to pass down the Vanguard trait, as I needed to begin breeding Univotes to obtain a mount for phase 1 of Hatalis Ultra. I also added the Azura main Alpha boss into my routine to obtain my head of electrical department. I then headed towards the Scars of War and began capturing Wixens for academic purposes. I also managed to obtain another Frostallion, this time with the Vanguard trait, and I can clearly say for these 4 days, my HR department was definitely doing a very good job. On day 21, I began my academic studies with Wixen using my Rayhound to produce a Yakumo with the Stronghold Strategist trait, and on day 22, I headed towards the sealed realm of the Glacial Core, where Neptilus could be found. But this time, I was not there to capture it, but to collect the quartz in the area since I needed circuit boards to begin building the crude oil extractors, which was my main bottleneck for the challenge thus far. I then received an email from my HR department telling me to head to the Goblin's Turf in the dead of night to begin recruiting some night workers, Elzephers, as I needed several copies of them with either the Vanguard, Swift, or Stronghold strategies so that they could be bred with Frostallion to give me my second mount for the Hatalis Ultra fight, Frostallion Noct. I then added another task to my daily list of responsibilities. I began clearing bases in Sakurajima and the Astral Mountains as I needed to collect the Kinship Peaches for my endgame raid teams. These also gave me extra pals such as Wixen Noct, Kikit, Chillet, Cybele Legs. I have no idea how to say that name. I began settling up my breeding base in the Forgotten Islands and captured Neptilus on day 26. Not going to lie, at this point in the run, my brain had completely turned into mush. So, I began taking notes and powered through the challenge, taking it day by day. And on day 29, I had finally managed to obtain an Azura main with remarkable craftsmanship. I had also bred a Yakumo with Demon God, began heading towards the Wildlife Sanctuary number 3 to order a Fanglope with Demon God. But unfortunately, according to the Yakumo Logistics Private Limited, there was an issue with my delivery and I continued to fail endlessly in my attempts to obtain a Fanglope with Demon God. On day 31, I heard from my local consultant called Reddit, who always told me 99% of gamblers quit before they hit it big. And with the amount of suffering I had endured, I was sure that I would get a Fanglope with Demon God this time.
Oh, fuck yeah! This is the shit! Kill me now!
Eventually, I have finally obtained a Fanglope with Demon God, which meant that I could now begin breeding Fanglope Luxus for my Hatalis Ultra raid battle. Again, if you want to know the strategy, head over to my other challenge video instead, since I will not really be covering much of the strategy behind it. At the same time, I began breeding my Frostallion Noct, which was a change from my Hatalis Ultra video, since breeding made passing down the traits much easier. I also began clearing arena challenges to obtain the Holy Burst Skill Fruit, as well as began farming skill fruits using the Skill Fruit Orchids. On day 33, I began spending some time hunting the female daydreams during the night cycle, hoping that Yakumo could pass down its demonic tendencies down to a Venworm. Spoiler alert, I was initially planning to use this Venworm with Meteor Rain to begin breeding a team of Chillets for the Xenolot Ultra fight. But I eventually scrapped this idea since I had ran out of time in the end. I will probably elaborate more on that in a future video, maybe if it's useful. On day 34, I began the process of mass capturing Godvins as I needed a fully condensed team of Godvins with Vanguard and Stronghold strategies, essentially turning my character into a walking disaster. My routine at this point was to defeat the rampaging pals, breed my pals, capture Godfins, farming the Terraria dungeon, questioning my life choices, and repeating everything every single bloody day. And finally, on day 37, after what felt like an eternity, I finally obtained the legendary Terra Prisma schematic, allowing me to finally remove one task from my daily responsibilities. On day 38, I began breeding Univotes together to obtain a Univote with Swift, Vanguard, and Stronghold strategies. I also headed towards the Phantom Owl to begin capturing Gelroys for their passive ability, increasing the loot gain from salvaging in the ocean. And by day 41, the Industrial Revolution had finally been realized, as I had obtained enough crude oil to craft the gigantic furnace. So, I decided to unlock and defeat the Fabric Tower boss, Bjorn and his Bastigor, by defeating the Capriti Noct Alpha boss, Dazi Noct Alpha boss, and Omascule Alpha boss. Bjorn was the last tower boss, the most difficult tower boss in the game. What kind of Gigabrain 200 IQ big brain plan did I have to defeat Bjorn? Is something so mechanically intensive that it takes 1,000 hours of hard work for you to replicate this. Strategy was to run in circles around the boss and wait for the problem to go away. Using a party of Godfins and a mount to convert your damage type, you can honestly defeat any tower boss in the game, even the hard variants using the Terra Prisma. But I can see you guys saying in the comments, what if you didn't have the legendary Terra Prisma? Honestly, this strategy just requires a Terra Prisma. You don't really need the legendary Terra Prisma. I just prefer it to, since it has a larger durability and is more likely to last throughout the entire fight. Since I was on the default settings, yeah, it's just a lot easier. Moving on to day 45, started to farm the arena tickets to obtain the Apocalypse skill fruit while salvaging in the ocean for Corellum ore. Since I wanted to craft the saddle for my favorite pal in the game, Neptilus, but I was already almost halfway through the challenge, and I still felt like I hadn't made the progress towards my objectives as much as I would have liked. So I decided to change things up. It was time for me to begin my actual objective of defeating every alpha pal, defeating every tower boss, capturing every pal in the game, and I will be saving the best for last, defeating the raid bosses. On day 49, I captured the Guardian Beast of Twilight, Gildane, as he had the partner ability of converting my player damage into ground type, which is perfect for countering Zoe and her Grisbolt. I also happened to breed my perfect Frostallion Noct, and with my new Emo Ice Horse, I could head into Sakurajima to challenge Saya and her Silene. And as for strategy, yep, you guessed it, I ran around in circles. But somehow my Emo Horse actually gave in to its urges and lost its life during the battle. However, once again, my Terra Prisma just did its thing, and Saya and Celine died anyway. On day 53, I finally had some spare time and headed towards the Rain Syndicate tower boss, and somehow I hadn't even attempted this tower boss since the beginning of the game. So I just blew some wind in their direction and Zoe and her Grisbolt was defeated. This time, I re-attempted the tower boss, challenging her hard variant. But once again, the battle was trivial. I just repeated what I had been doing for every single tower boss. I then repeated the same strategy against Lily and her Lylene, this time using Chillet Ignis to convert my damage type to fire, and also defeated Axel and his Orzhov using Frostallion to convert my damage type to ice. Next up, Saya and her Celine hard mode. I also repeated this strategy for Marcus and his Phalaris, and eventually Bjorn and his Bastegor, completing my first major objective of defeating all of the tower bosses within 100 days. On day 55, I went back to my usual routine and just realized that I forgot Victor existed. So I defeated him and actually completed all of the tower boss for real this time. Next, I decided to complete my next objective, defeating the alpha bosses in the game. However, since the alpha bosses were much weaker compared to the tower bosses, you can just look here for the results of the challenge. Now that I have completed 2 of the major challenges, at this point, I had also looked through my Palpedia and bred or captured the various pals in the game, completely filling up my list of pals with the exception of the raid bosses. With this, I was left with one final objective. The objective that I had been building towards from the very beginning, that had dictated practically every decision in this challenge. This was going to validate my suffering or completely ruin my day. It was time for me to defeat the raid bosses. I first started with the easiest raid boss, Belenoir. There's nothing much for me to say about this fight, since I was extremely over leveled and I don't think anyone expected me to fail in this battle. Next, I moved on to Belenoir Libero. Similarly, I was still over leveled for this, and Belenoir Libero went down with practically no resistance. My Fanglobluxus had constantly paralyzed her and triggered her stun phases several times, ending the battle in less than a minute. Against Belenoir Libero, although the boss was only level 50, I had begun taking the battle more seriously since I was expecting all of the Ultra raids to pack a huge punch. I simply maintained my distance with my legendary Terra Prisma, whittling away at the boss's health, triggering its aggression and keeping my raid pal safe. The battle went by pretty easily, ending in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Next on this chopping block was Blazemet Ryu. Similar to Belenoir Libero, this battle went by pretty easily, ending in less than a minute. And as much as I would like to create some tension for the video, Blazemet Ryu Ultra was really easy, ending in a minute and 30 seconds. For the next battle against Xenolot, I would say that Xenolot was actually significantly more difficult compared to the previous 2 raid bosses due to its ability to summon additional pals into the battle, overwhelming me with its sheer numbers. Not only that, I just personally find Xenolot's attacks to be the most problematic, as it was extremely difficult to dodge. This battle, even though it was just a normal Xenolot, was extremely close as I had died once in the battle. But fortunately for me, my raid team was just way too strong, as they seemed relatively unfazed. But this did not feel like it was boding well for me, as it felt like I was going to suffer against its Ultra variant if I was already dying to its normal variant. Feeling a little bit uneasy at how I was struggling a little bit at defeating Xenolot, I decided to change up the order a little bit and go ahead to challenge Hartalis instead. Especially since I had completed the challenge a month earlier, the information and the mechanics needed to defeat Hartalis was still fresh on my mind. Unfortunately, since Hartalis was still a little bit weak compared to his Ultra variant, I was not too concerned about anything honestly. All I was concerned about was just timing my raid team's abilities and ensuring that they had them up whenever Hartalis triggered its barrier phase. Aside from that, the battle went pretty smoothly, and I eventually defeated Hartalis in about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Alright, so for Hatelis Ultra, I think I'm gonna differ a little bit from my previous challenge and just provide a little bit of commentary to help explain my decision making during the battle itself. Basically, against Hatelis Ultra, you want to ensure that its attacks are constantly focused on you and you are constantly away from your red pals. Hatelis Ultra does a lot of AoE, for example like Geyser Rush. With their water pillars going around everywhere, honestly, just keep running and you'll not get hit by it. It's the same thing for Solar Blast here. All you have to do is just constantly run in circles and it will never hit you or your red pals. Over here, Hatelis used Crosswinds, which I couldn't really see because of the tornadoes flying around Hatelis, but typically you just want to stay still for them attack instead. Now for Circle Vine and Curtain Splash, just keep running around. They will never hit you, so long as you just keep running around Hatelis Ultra. Right now at this point, I realized that my team is beginning to use their attacks, so I'm trying to direct Hatelis away from their attacks, as I didn't want to accidentally trigger his barrier phase right now. Especially since even with fully upgraded Party of Godfins, I don't really have the damage to break the barriers on my own. So what I'm doing now is I'm just stalling for time and waiting for my Red Army to have their attacks back up. And now that Hatelis Ultra's health bar is approaching 660,000, now I begin to fire away, trying to trigger Hatelis Ultra's barrier phase. And as you can see, so long as my pals are attacking, the barrier just shatters almost immediately. And just take note that this build might have a lot of visual clutter, you know. And whenever you're attacking Hatelis Ultra, I would generally advise you not to aim for critical hits, just because it's a lot better and a lot more consistent if you land your attacks rather than trying to get a critical hit. It's fine if you want to get the critical hit when it is stunned after the barrier phase, but aside from that, just generally do the same thing, stay alive, watch what attacks Hatelis is doing, and don't worry so much about the elemental shields, because Apocalypse, Thunder Railgun and Thunderstorm are quite optimized to actually destroy Hatelis Ultra's shields. So right now, since I'm about to trigger the second phase, and also that's Aqua Surge, that's probably the only attacks you must jump over it. You can't really run through it. As long as you get hit by the initial burst from Aqua Surge, you are definitely going to take both hits. In any case, the second phase has begun. I'm beginning to swap out my party pals and immediately removing my raid team. I've tried to experiment with this, but generally you don't really have a choice. You must remove your raid party. And also, all you need to do in this phase is just wait for your screen to turn white, summon your pal and just resummon your pals back in. Theoretically, I could have done this a lot quicker, but I wasn't really paying attention. And because of that, Hatelis Ultra actually activated Sacred Rain. So, in my previous challenge, that run essentially destroys your entire raid party. But this time we got lucky again, and all you need to do is the same thing. Keep Hatelis focused on you. All of its attacks are relatively easy to dodge. The only important thing to note is to be careful of air blades when you're staying too close to the boss. I have no idea what this attack is, but honestly it's a piece of cake, just run around. Same thing for Power Bomb, just keep running around. And right now you can see that I'm trying to face my cursor away from Hatelis, But at the same time, I'm trying to keep the boss within my screen. So it was precisely for this, Sacred Rain actually changes Hatalis' position based on where your cursor is looking. And you want to keep your cursor away from your raid team. And as for why you need to ensure that Hatalis stays in your screen, a little known fact is that the Terra Prisma only attacks any opposing piles that are within the confines of your screen. So even if Hatalis Ultra is kind of like in the corner of your screen, your Terra Prismas would still be able to attack him. Over here I see that Hatalis Ultra immediately channels its Divine Wings, so I just immediately counter with my own Crystal Wing. So the whole purpose of this build to obtain a Frostallion knocked with Swift is precisely for me to dodge that, since it's kind of like an undodgeable move otherwise. Aside from that, I think I've said everything. The run just becomes a matter of repetition, following the same patterns, constantly facing your cursor away from Hatalis. And oh yeah, so I nearly forgot to mention, Hatalis also triggers this kind of nuke phase when he hits 606,000 HP. So just take note of that. And also it's always the nuke phase, so you have to ensure that you recall your red pals. So we are just going to repeat the same thing at this point. Just run around, constantly shooting. Over here I was confident in shooting Hatalis because I just knew that it wasn't going to cast Sacred Rain anytime soon. I can't really remember why, but that was my thought process. And this is exactly why you should not do that, because I nearly lost the entire raid battle because of it. Over here I casted Crystal Wing a little bit too late, and I ended up getting clipped by Divine Wings. But thankfully I had my shield, so I didn't take too much damage from it. Aside from that, right now I'm noticing my pals are casting their abilities, so I'm trying my best to lower Hatalis Ultra's health, because it triggers its second barrier phase at 303 HP, and now that the shield has been broken, you'll notice it breaks almost instantly. So I'm just hammering away, trying to kill it ASAP. Aside from that, the rest of the fight goes relatively easily, so there's not much for me to add here. You can just enjoy some ASMR shooting of Hatalis Ultra, I guess. And now, after defeating Hatalis and Hatalis Ultra on my first try, all that was left in my way was to defeat Xenolot Ultra and Moonlord Master. However, let's just say things did not go so smoothly for Xenolot Ultra. Moving on to the Xenolot fight, honestly this was the one boss that I had the most trouble with, but after testing out and losing several fights against Xenolot Ultra, I realized a neat little trick you could do, which was just to hover slightly above the Xenolot itself. So as you can see, because I'm hovering directly above it, I'm not even trying to attack him with my overheat rifle. My priority was simply just staying alive. So I just relied on my Terra Prisma, occasionally shooting with the overheat rifle, But this is the main reason for this tactic. All of Xenolod's attacks apparently covers a very large area in front of him, but not really above him. And similarly for the Xenovaders that he summons, they can't really attack me when I'm this high up. The only exception will be this attack from Xenolod, and I made sure to keep Blizzard Spike and double Blizzard Spike, because although the initial attacks were quite painful, the final charge is where the bulk of the damage was. So I managed to freeze him before he actually got the charge off, but unfortunately as he casted his second wave of ads, my Frostallion kind of ran out of stamina and I lost the spacing I had originally, so my Frostallion took a lot of damage. But as you can see, it's only 1 minute 30 into the run and Xenolod is already less than half of its health. And at this point I thought I had finally done it. But honestly, you are going to find out why that is not the case soon enough. So as I'm running around, once again Frostallion is about to lose its stamina. So I'm trying to hold on until there is an opening and I eventually land down to get back some stamina. But unfortunately I believe Frostallion should be dying soon. Oh no. Okay, so the third wave of ads, just came on. And what ends up happening is, this time I actually failed to stop this charge attack from Xenolod because my Frostallion actually dies. And because of that, I die along with it. And over here, I was kind of hoping that my Red Pals would do the job. But looking at how the monsters are not actually moving, I figured that my entire raid team is dead. You know? But since I still had 7 minutes, I thought that I had the time to revive my Frostallion, maybe kill Xenolod using my own DPS. But my priority now, I just need to get away, as far away. So this gave me the opening to try and charge up my Terra Prisma to continue damaging, but unfortunately I die once again. And this is kind of the biggest reason why I absolutely hate the Xenolod battle, but I love it at the same time. Because its own unique mechanic of summoning extra pals to join the battle is so frustrating to deal against. Over here I didn't even get a single chance as I spawned Xenolod immediately used the same charge attack from earlier. And at this point, I just decided in my heart I was gonna win this battle. I was gonna brute force it. So there's not gonna be much strategy here. All you're gonna be seeing is me struggling, trying to respawn and summon the Frostallion, I believe. I equipped the grappling hook to get a little bit more distance, but again, there's just way too many ads. This feels so impossible, but over here, before I respawn, I noticed that the pals started running towards my dead body. So I figured I was gonna take advantage of this, letting them run away from the pal box, so that when I respawn, I would have a lot more time to actually escape. And seemingly it looked like it worked, because some of them were still a distance away. Over here, I immediately flew up and began charging my Terra Prisma, because I figured, it would be safe up here. But I realized Xenolod immediately activated the same charge attack they used earlier. And I had no choice but to recall my Frostallion because I knew I was gonna die regardless. This time I was looking at the screen, again the pals are not running to me except for that one Xenoguard. So I just respawned and just tried to do the same thing, but unfortunately my Frostallion died. So I had to revive it, and this time I was just hoping I could get some breathing room at least. Xenolod only at 170k HP, it's so little. Like, I could deal that damage within like 30 seconds or so, I'm pretty sure. And honestly at this point, I was getting pretty frustrated. But over here I had an inkling, looking at how Xenolod is casting its attacks even though I'm on the ground. But when I flew up, I was wondering, if I stayed too far away from Xenolod, would it always channel this barrage and the charge. That was something that I kind of thought of on the spot. So this time when I respawned, what I was thinking of is essentially just summoning Frostallion, but I would hover directly above Xenolot once again. I would try not to go too far away from him, and it turns out that I think at this point my hypothesis was right, as you don't really see Xenolot charging up that barrage attack once more. So this time, since my Frostallion was low enough, oh my god, I was hoping to dodge the attacks from the other pals, but unfortunately they died. So I knew that I would not have a chance to summon Frostallion, so I just tried to get some damage in before I eventually fell. All I had to do was just do a little bit of chip damage every time I respawned. Since over there I did about 10k damage, so all I had to do was just respawn 8 more times and do 10k worth of damage each time. So at this point it was a done deal, but suddenly all of the pals are just surrounding me whenever I spawn, which made it impossible for me to actually try and damage the boss. So this time I had to try and run away using Frostallion. But over here, I'm kind of expecting a ranged attack, and yep, it does a laser beam to me. So yeah, that's the rest of the run. I was essentially just brute forcing it, hoping I would get enough damage down to kill Xenolot before the timer ran out, since I don't really have a choice. There were too many ads present in the battle. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed my frustratingly successful attempt at defeating Xenolot. Okay, so now that I have finally defeated Xenolot Ultra, the only obstacle I have remaining is Moonlord Master. However, I'm not sure if this is a hot take, but I actually believe that Moonlord Master is the easiest raid boss to defeat, even easier than Belenoir Libero Ultra. Let me explain. So for Moonlord Master, at this point, I could just simply brute force it by equipping my Terra Prisma with my usual overheat rifle and just tanking all of the damage and eventually defeating it. However, for Moonlord Master, honestly, as the final raid boss of the challenge, this battle felt extremely underwhelming. Because honestly, the most effective strategy for defeating Moonlord Master was to just stand outside your base and shoot him down for 8 minutes straight, and I'm not even kidding. Although this was an underwhelming battle, I would at least want to explain the main mechanic and method of defeating Moonlord Master. Moonlord Master's health bar is divided into 4 quarters, with each eyeball on the forehead and the 2 palms having a quarter of its health bar. All you had to do was to destroy the eye on its forehead, left and right palm, and the heart located in its chest that will only appear once you destroy all 3 eyes. And all you had to do was stand outside your base and fire your weapon towards the eyeballs whenever they opened. Although I was using the charged rifle for the first eyeball in the forehead, I would recommend to just utilize the default plasma cannon as it is much more consistent and easier to land your shot. And although this battle is simple, honestly speaking, trying to hit the eyeballs is a lot harder than it seems. And this is coming from me, who frequently hits Immortal in Valorant. I would like to explain the method to land your shots consistently on the palms, since that was the hardest section for this fight. You see, the palms have 3 different kinds of attacks. Number 1, summoning the big eyes. In this attack, the palm will almost always move in an arc, so just anticipate the arc and have your cursor be ahead of the palm and just left click. This will almost always land the shot. In the second attack, the eyes are kind of summoning the will-o-wisps. When this happens, it will stay roughly in its location, so just move your cursor over there and just shoot whenever it summons the wisps. In the third attack, the eyeball will be summoning straight shots towards your PAL box. In this attack, the palms will stay still, so you can just simply shoot it. And that's pretty much all you need to know. Its forehead is rather straightforward, and for the heart, is vulnerable the entire time, so you can just close your eyes and left click. Albeit underwhelming, you would have noticed that I stopped mentioning the days of the run, since honestly this section of the run was quite boring to me. It mainly consisted of me collecting materials to be able to run the Sinola Ultra raid several times, and the same thing for the Moonlord Master, since I ended up missing way too many shots until I actually discovered its patterns. And honestly, after doing this challenge, I can confidently say that my favorite part of Palworld has honestly been the raid battles. I placed a lot lesser emphasis on the other challenges, simply because when you've reached the end of the game, they felt more like an afterthought. And because of this, I feel like I have many opinions on the current state of Palworld. Such as the tower bosses and the alpha bosses, it was simply way too easy to complete the moment you obtain a Terra Prisma. As for capturing all of the pals, I do feel that resorting to breeding, aside from pals like Bastigor, kinda felt boring, so I will also be explaining in a different video how can you actually capture the pals without resorting to breeding. That's pretty much it. Thank you for watching my video on defeating Palworld in 100 days. I forgot to mention earlier, I completed the game on day 85. So if you like this content, please like and subscribe and leave a comment, even just a simple one saying hi or what you don't like about this video or what you prefer to see in this kind of video, as it helps to boost my video metrics and maybe YouTube might introduce it to more people. I will also likely be making my next video about capturing the pals, as well as my opinions on the state of the game and what I hope would change in Palworld 1.0, as well as what should you do to prepare for Palworld 1.0.